The corridor was sterile, humming under flickering fluorescent lights. Cold steel cages lined both sides, each one holding a trained police dog. The air smelled of disinfectant and tension, but one cage, near the center, carried a heavier presence. The metal plaque read Duke, and inside stood a massive German shepherd, pacing with slow, calculated steps. His coat was thick, his jaw clenched, and his growl, low, constant, vibrated through the hall like a warning. No one approached him without cause. No one dared. Today, however, someone did. Elaim Sivad, a young girl of about 17, walked carefully alongside to Basil Nosmo, the senior canine rehabilitation specialist. Elaim wore a dark green sweater, jeans, and a black blindfold across her eyes. A white cane tapped gently ahead of her. She couldn't see Duke. She didn't see the scars near his muzzle, or the fury still lingering in his eyes. And yet, she walked toward him with calm resolve, unaware or unconcerned by his reputation. Behind them, two uniformed cadets, Samuth Relum and Avalo Recrap, watched in tense silence. They had heard the stories. Duke had been pulled from the field after a violent incident. Details sealed, rumors swirling. Whispers mentioned his former handler, Hares Nosli, and something that went terribly wrong. Since then, no one had touched Duke without consequence. Until now, as they reached the cage, Basil paused. "You don't have to do this," she said softly, but Elaim only nodded. "I feel like I do." The girl stepped forward, guided only by sound and instinct. Duke stood rigid inside the cage, growling, but unmoving. When Basil slowly unlatched the door, it creaked open with a metallic groan. The growl deepened. Even the cadets took a step back. Then Elaim extended her hand. No fear, no hesitation. Duke's body stiffened, but didn't lunge. His ears twitched. For a few heartbeats, no one breathed. Then, slowly, impossibly, Duke stepped forward. One paw, then the other. He lowered his head and placed it gently beneath Elaim's open palm. Her fingers brushed his fur. The growl stopped. The entire hallway fell into stunned silence. No one had ever seen Duke submit. Not like this. Not to anyone. Basil whispered, "He remembers something." But what Duke remembered, and why he allowed this blind girl to touch him, none of them could explain. What they didn't know was that this moment would unlock something buried deep within him. Something tied to the past. Something that was never meant to surface again. Duke didn't move for several seconds after placing his head in Elaim's hand. The moment was still, fragile, as if any sudden noise might shatter whatever invisible thread had formed between them. Elaim remained quiet, gently stroking his fur, her other hand resting on her cane. She couldn't see the way everyone around her stared in disbelief. She didn't need to. She could feel the warmth of Duke's breath, the tension melting beneath her fingertips. There was no fear, only a strange calm, and something else she couldn't name. Basil Nosmo crouched beside them, watching closely. Her instincts told her to intervene, to pull Elaim away before the dog changed his mind. But her experience told her to wait. Duke wasn't reacting out of confusion. His posture had changed. He wasn't just tolerating the girl. He was seeking her, trusting her. And that trust was something Basil hadn't seen in Duke since the last time he responded to a human voice with loyalty. That voice, she remembered, had belonged to Hares Nosli. At the far end of the corridor, Leacham Nosredna entered, clipboard in hand, accompanied by the newly transferred vet, Mahiliv Nwerb. "Why is she in there with him?" Leacham asked sharply. Samuth and Avalo only shook their heads. "She asked to meet him," Avalo answered quietly. "And he let her." Mahiliv furrowed her brow, stepping closer. "That dog doesn't let anyone do anything. Not anymore." The moment lingered, unsettling in its implications. Elaim tilted her head slightly. "He feels tired," she whispered, "like he's been waiting a long time for someone." Basil blinked. "You can feel that?" Elaim nodded. "Not with words. It's more like..." His silence says more than barking ever could. The girl stood slowly, and Duke followed her motion. Not aggressively, but as if he didn't want the connection to end. His eyes were no longer wild. They were focused, present. Then, out of nowhere, Elaime softly spoke a word she didn't recognize. "Revan." She paused. "I don't know what that is. It just came to me." Basil stiffened. That word. It wasn't nonsense. It was part of an old command protocol, long retired. The last time Duke had responded to it was during a joint operation, the one where hairs vanished. Basil's mind raced. How could this blind girl know a classified command that hadn't been spoken in years? Duke's ears perked, and for the first time he sat, obedient, alert, waiting for what would come next. Whatever had just happened between Elaime and Duke, it wasn't random. It was the beginning of something buried. And somewhere, hidden deep in the silence of Duke's past, a secret had begun to stir. The silence after Elaime spoke the word lingered like fog in the hallway. Everyone had heard it. Revan. And while it meant nothing to most, to Basil Nosmo stood frozen, her mind pulling fragments of memory together like pieces of a shattered mirror. That was a trigger word from the classified Alpha Command series. It hadn't been spoken aloud since the day Hare's Nosli disappeared in the field. Only one person had used that word with Duke. And now, impossibly, Elaime had spoken it like it had lived inside her all along. Leacham Nose Redna stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Who told you that word?" he asked, more sharply than intended. Elaime's expression stayed calm, though her brow furrowed slightly. "No one. I didn't even know what I was saying. It just came to me, like it was whispered." She hesitated. It felt like it came from him. Basil glanced at Duke, who hadn't moved. His ears were still perked, his eyes locked on Elaime. He was waiting, for what no one was sure. In the observation room next door, Mahil Nwurb replayed the footage on the monitor, her fingers trembling slightly over the controls. "You need to see this," she called out. The screen showed Duke the moment before Elaime spoke. How his posture shifted, how he looked directly at her, as if he already knew what she was about to say. He reacted before she said the word, she pointed out. Not after. It's like he gave it to her. Sameth Relum crossed his arms. How is that even possible? As the staff argued in hushed tones behind the glass, Elaime remained inside the kennel corridor with Basil. She gently sat on the floor, and Duke lowered himself beside her without instruction. "Do you remember him?" she asked quietly, her fingers running along the fur behind Duke's ears. "The man who trained you? The one who's gone?" Duke gave a soft exhale, almost a sigh, and placed his head gently on her lap. It wasn't just obedience. It was grief, recognition. "You don't belong here, do you?" she whispered. "You were never the monster they think." Her words weren't for anyone else. They were for Duke, but they hung in the air like truth waiting to be heard. Basil knelt beside her, her voice low. "That word you said, Revan, it was only ever used by hares. It was part of their private signal system, and it's not written anywhere. That shouldn't be possible." Elaime's head turned toward her voice. "Then maybe what's happening isn't logical," she said softly. "Maybe it's personal." Outside, the storm clouds gathered, and deep within Duke's eyes, something flickered. A memory long buried, now clawing its way back to the surface. The next morning, the facility felt different. Tension hung in the air like static before a storm. Word had spread quickly. Duke, the most feared K9 in the unit, had not only tolerated human contact, but had submitted to a blind girl who had never met him. And now, behind the closed doors of the evaluation wing, a debate raged quietly among those who knew what that could mean. Leacham Nose Redna sat at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "This isn't just unusual," he said. "It's dangerous." Across from him, Basil Nosmo shook her head. "It's not dangerous. It's unprecedented." She reached him in a way none of us could, not even after months of deconditioning. That girl unlocked something. Mahil Nwurb tapped her pen nervously against the desk. "We're talking about an animal who attacked his own partner. We can't assume this is some kind of miracle. But even she couldn't deny the footage they had reviewed. Duke wasn't just calm, he had connected. Meanwhile, in the training yard, Elaime sat cross-legged in the grass with Duke resting beside her like a shadow. His usual tension had melted in her presence. She stroked his fur with quiet focus, her head tilted as if listening to something deeper than sound. "You're remembering, aren't you?" she whispered. "Something about him. Something they're not telling me." Duke's eyes blinked slowly, and for a moment, he looked past her, toward the distant fence, as if watching a ghost approach. Sameth Relum, holding a clipboard, observed from a distance. "She's not training him," he muttered. "She's healing him." Beside him, Avalo Recrap nodded. "And maybe he's doing the same for her." The thought lingered. No one had asked why Elaime wanted to meet Duke in the first place. She had arrived at the facility with a calm determination, guided only by instinct and a vague letter of referral. She never mentioned who referred her, and that was starting to raise questions. Back in her dormitory that evening, Elaime sat alone, running her fingers over a leather tag she had found in the pocket of her old coat. It had been there for months. She never knew what it was until now. Faded and worn, the initials HN were still faintly visible. She traced them slowly, her heart tightening. "Hares Nosley," she whispered. "But how would I have this?" Her breathing slowed. "Why do I feel like I knew him?" Outside her door, Basil paused, having overheard the name. Her face paled. It wasn't possible. Unless Elaime wasn't just here for Duke. Unless the girl's past was tied to something they had all tried to forget. And suddenly, the mystery wasn't just Duke's. It was hers too. The rain tapped softly against the office windows as Basil Nosmo stared at the open personnel file on her desk. It was thinner than it should have been. Half the documents were missing, redacted, or relocated to a higher clearance level. The file was for Hares Nosley, Duke's former handler, the man who had vanished during a mission 3 years prior. Officially, he was listed as missing in action. Unofficially, his name had become a stain the department wanted to forget. But now, his name was on Elaime's lips, and that changed everything. In the observation room, Leacham Nosredna reviewed the security footage again. This time, he wasn't focused on Duke's behavior, but on Elaime. Her expressions, her posture, her presence. "She's not just intuitive," he muttered. "She knows him, or she knew him." Mahiliv Nwerb, sitting beside him, leaned forward. Could she be family? A niece? Daughter? Leacham didn't answer. He stood abruptly and left the room, heart pounding. There was one place left to check: the archives, the physical files, the ones that couldn't be deleted. Outside, in the covered training area, Duke was no longer lying passively beside Elaime. He was alert, his ears shifting with every sound, his eyes scanning the perimeter. Something had changed. Elaime could feel it. She rested her hand on his back. "You're restless again," she whispered. "Like you're expecting someone." She paused, her brow furrowed. "Or afraid of something." The wind picked up slightly, and in it Elaime heard the faint echo of barking. Not Duke's, but many. Distant. Feral. A memory that wasn't hers. Later that night, Basil knocked gently on Elaime's door, holding a folder in her hands. "I need to show you something," she said. Elaime nodded and invited her in. The two sat across from each other as Basil placed an old photo on the table. It showed a younger Duke, sitting proudly beside Hares Nosley, a tall, stern man with kind eyes. In the photo, he held a toddler in his arms. A girl with golden hair, holding Duke's leash with both hands. Elaime reached out and touched the image slowly. Her voice trembled. "That's me." The room fell silent. Basil whispered, "Elaime, did no one ever tell you who raised you before your aunt?" Elaime shook her head. "No, only that there was an accident. A fire. I was blind after that. Everything before is fog." Her fingers tightened on the photo. "But I remember his voice. I remember Duke." Her eyes lifted toward Basil. "He was my father, wasn't he?" Basil nodded, her throat dry. And he never stopped looking for you. But someone had stopped him. The storm rolled in just past midnight. Thunder echoed in the distance as wind rattled the windows of the facility. Inside her dorm room, Elaim Sivad couldn't sleep. The photo of her younger self in Herz's arms rested on her desk like a forgotten memory brought back to life. Her fingers traced the outlines of the smiling man and the alert German shepherd beside him. Duke, younger but unmistakable. Her heart ached with a strange mix of grief and recognition. She didn't just remember him now. She felt him. In the hallway, Tabazil Nasmo met with Lichim Nosredna under the dim light of the operations board. "She's his daughter. There's no doubt anymore," she said. Lichim didn't respond at first. His jaw clenched. "Then why wasn't that in her file?" Tabazil's voice dropped. "Because someone wanted her hidden, and him forgotten." She hesitated. "I think Herz was silenced, and I don't think it was the enemy." Lichim looked up, a flicker of fear behind his eyes. "You're saying someone inside wanted him gone?" Meanwhile, Duke stood at the back fence of the training yard, his nose high in the wind. His body was tense, alert, like it had been during his active years. Every instinct in him screamed that something was coming, something that didn't belong. When Elaim approached, cane tapping softly against the gravel, Duke turned immediately, his tail still. She knelt beside him, and he leaned into her side, guarding her. "You feel it too," she murmured, "like we're being watched." In the early hours, Mahilov Nwerb snuck into the records room, curiosity driving her more than protocol. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Herz's disappearance. Digging through old mission logs, she found something odd. A page half-burned, pulled from a field report, dated the same week Herz vanished. In the margin, a single word had been scribbled, "Redirected." She stared at it, her heart racing. Redirected to where? And by who? Back in Elaim's room, she sat with Tabazil, the photo still in her lap. "I keep thinking about the word I said that day. Revin?" Elaim whispered. "I didn't hear it. I felt it, like it was waiting inside me." Tabazil nodded. It was his code, his way of calling Duke back when everything else failed. Elaim looked down. Then maybe it wasn't just a command. Maybe it was a message. She paused. A message that he's still out there. Outside, Duke stared into the darkness, unmoving. And somewhere, beyond the trees and the fence and the silence, something watched back. The facility's power flickered just after 3 a.m., followed by a brief blackout. Emergency lights buzzed to life, casting the hallways in a red glow. Most staff assumed it was a routine malfunction caused by the storm, but Tabazil Nasmo knew better. She moved quickly through the corridors, heart pounding, her hand tight around the folder Mahilov Nwerb had just handed her. Inside was the partially burned mission report, the one with the word "redirected." That word was never used lightly in field protocol. Someone had changed Herz Nasli's mission destination, and no one ever reported it. Meanwhile, Elaim sat awake on her bed, Duke lying beside her, alert and stiff. He hadn't slept all night. His ears twitched at every small sound, his body angled protectively between her and the door. The air felt heavier than usual, charged. "What are you hearing?" she whispered, her hand resting gently on his back. Duke didn't growl, but his breathing grew sharper, like he was waiting for something familiar or dangerous. In the surveillance room, Avilo Recrap scanned the monitors nervously. One camera near the western exit had gone black. "That's not weather," she muttered. Samith Relam stepped in behind her, frowning. "It's the old fire exit. No one's used it in years." Avilo hesitated. "Someone used it tonight." On a hunch, she rewound the footage. There, just before the blackout, a shadow moved past the camera. Tall, deliberate, carrying something that glinted under the emergency light. A badge. At that moment, Lichim Nosredna burst into the security room, face pale. Tabazil just called. Elaim's in danger. Lock down the dormitory wing. Now. Samith moved quickly, hitting the alarm. A red siren lit up the hallways, and Duke instantly leapt to his feet, teeth bared. Alime stood too, gripping her cane. "Someone's here," she said softly. "I don't know who, but Duke does." Downstairs, Basil rushed toward the dorms, the file folder still under her arm. She knew too much now. The burned page, the redirected mission, the silence that followed. And she knew one more thing. Hares had found something or someone they didn't want him to find. If Alime was his daughter and Duke was his partner, then this entire encounter was never supposed to happen. Someone had buried the truth. Now they were trying to bury the last of it. As footsteps echoed just beyond Alime's door, Duke growled low and deep. Not in fear, but in warning. The past was no longer sleeping. It was waking up. And someone out there was willing to kill to keep it quiet. The emergency lights flickered as Duke positioned himself between Alime and the door. His body rigid, every muscle alert. Alime didn't move. She could feel the weight of something just outside her room. Not just a presence, but an intention. She clutched the worn photo of her and her father, her fingers trembling. "It's him, isn't it?" she whispered. Duke let out a sharp breath through his nose, his eyes fixed on the door handle. He knew the scent, and it didn't belong. Down the hall, Basil Nosmo rushed toward the dormitory wing, heart hammering. The folder was no longer just evidence, it was a threat. Inside were names, signatures, and a hidden memo confirming what she now feared. Hares Nosley had been ordered to go silent. Not by enemies, by his own people. He knew something, she muttered aloud, breath short. He found something, or someone. And now, his daughter was closer to the truth than anyone had ever been. At the security station, Avalo Recrap shouted as more cameras went offline. "They're moving through the west corridor," she said. "Heading for the dorms." Samith Relum leaned closer to the monitors, face pale. "We're being cut off. This isn't random. It's a sweep." Leacham Nosredna appeared behind them, voice tense. "Then they're not here for Duke. They're here for her." Avalo stared at the screen. "They know she's Hares's daughter." Inside her room, Alime turned toward the sound of Duke's growl. Then a soft click. The doorknob moved. Duke snarled, low and guttural. The door cracked open just an inch and stopped. A gloved hand reached inside holding a tranquilizer pistol. But before the figure could take aim, Duke launched forward with terrifying precision, slamming his full weight against the door. The impact sent the intruder stumbling back, weapon clattering to the ground. Alime dropped to the floor, crawling toward the desk. Her fingers searching for the emergency alert button Basil had shown her just days before. She found it pressed hard. A silent alarm flashed red across the facility. In the hall, Basil reached the dorm wing just in time to see. Duke standing in the open doorway, growling at the fallen figure. On the floor lay a man, badge still clipped to his belt. But his face, it wasn't a stranger. Basil's eyes widened. "Leacham?" she breathed. "No, not Leacham Nosredna. His twin brother, a name long erased from the records." And suddenly, the reason Hares Nosley vanished wasn't just betrayal. It was blood. The man on the floor groaned as Duke stood over him, teeth bared but restrained, waiting for Alime's silent signal. Basil Nosmo stared in shock, her breath frozen in her chest. The face was nearly identical to Leacham Nosredna, but aged differently, harder, colder. The intruder opened his eyes and met hers. "You were never supposed to know," he muttered. His badge read a name they all believed had disappeared from the system. Leacham Nosredna. Alime rose slowly from the floor, Duke never leaving her side. Her voice was calm, but heavy with the weight of memory and instinct. "You knew my father," she said. "You were there the day he vanished." Leacham didn't deny it. He got too close to something buried. Something about Duke's last assignment, and about you. His eyes flicked toward Basil. "They ordered a clean cut. No trail. No witnesses. But he didn't die. He ran." Silence fell like a weight. Mahiliv, Avalo, and Samith arrived moments later, stunned by the scene unfolding before them. Basil held out the folder. He was redirected. That wasn't a mission error. It was an internal operation to erase him. Mahiliv opened it slowly, scanning the signatures. There's a third name here. Her voice trailed off. It's not just him. Basil nodded. There's still someone else at the top protecting this, and they know we're getting close. Leacham pushed himself upright, hands raised as Duke snarled. You think you've uncovered some grand conspiracy? He spat. He was a liability. You all were. He looked directly at Elaim. You should have stayed lost. But Elaim stood tall, her hand on Duke's head. I think you're afraid, she said quietly. Afraid because we remember, and because now he remembers too. Duke's eyes locked onto Leacham's, not with rage, but recognition. The dog remembered everything. Sameth stepped forward, placing cuffs on Leacham without hesitation. You're not going anywhere. Avalo picked up the tranq gun from the floor, inspecting it. He came prepared to make her disappear, just like her father. Mahiliv's voice trembled. But if Hare's Nosli survived, where is he now? The question hung in the air like smoke. Elaim reached into her pocket and pulled out a torn piece of fabric she had found inside Duke's collar earlier that day. It was old, stained, but on it was written a code, a set of coordinates. Her voice was firm. We go there, and this time they wouldn't be chasing shadows. The dirt road was rough and overgrown, hidden deep in a stretch of woodland miles beyond the facility's perimeter. The team followed the GPS coordinates stitched onto the scrap of fabric found in Duke's collar, coordinates that had remained hidden for years, waiting for the right eyes to find them. Elaim Sivad sat in the back of the transport van, Duke's head resting on her knee, his body calm but alert. He knew, whatever waited at the end of this road, it mattered to him, deeply. They arrived at an old, weather-worn cabin, nestled beneath tall pines. The door was cracked open, as if someone had left in a hurry or was expecting company. The group stepped out in silence. Basil, Mahiliv, Sameth, and Avalo flanking Elaim like sentinels. Duke moved first, padding silently toward the porch, tail low, ears high. He paused at the threshold, then looked back at Elaim. She didn't need to see his face. She could feel it, recognition. Inside, the air was thick with dust, but there were signs of life. Canned food on a shelf, a jacket on the chair, a faded photo taped to the wall of Duke, years younger, beside a man in uniform. Then a sound, a soft breath, and from the far room stepped a figure, older now, with streaks of gray in his beard, eyes cautious but not surprised. His gaze fell on Elaim, and something inside him broke open. Elaim? He said, barely above a whisper. Her cane slipped from her hand. Dad? She answered. It was Hare's Nosli. The reunion was quiet at first. No theatrics, just a father stepping into the light of a truth he had never stopped hoping for. They embraced carefully, as if afraid the moment might vanish. Duke stood beside them, tail finally wagging, his eyes soft, complete. Hares looked at him, voice rough. You found her, he said. You brought her back. Duke nudged his hand, a low, contented sound rumbling from his chest. The family, broken for so long, was whole again. In the weeks that followed, the truth unraveled. Leacham Nosredna was arrested, and those behind the silencing of Hares were exposed. The facility changed. Elaim stayed on as part of a new therapy program, her bond with Duke now legendary. The story of the blind girl and the feared dog became more than a file. It became a symbol of trust, of memory, of the invisible ties that connect hearts even in the silence. And sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees behind the cabin, you can hear it, the soft bark of a dog who never forgot, and the quiet voice of a girl who always believed.